And we grew up poor. I grew up in a kind of tin shack. The shop was in a tin shack, and I don't think we saw running tap water until I was probably, I don't know, 9, 10 years of age. And
this is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Hey everybody, this is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce himself. Kim, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Kim Tan, originally from Malaysia. That was where I grew up. Parents were immigrants from China. My dad came to Malaysia at the age of 18 with nothing except shirt on his back and was a laborer, and then ran a small business, initially selling vegetables and fruit and then provisions. And we grew up poor. I grew up in a kind of tin shack. The shop was in a tin shack, and I don't think we saw running tap water until I was probably, I don't know, 9, 10 years of age. And
wow. And where did you grow up in Malaysia? Where exactly?
Just in a rubber estate, kind of rural Malaysia, surrounded by rubber estates and paddy fields. But I had parents who sacrificed everything for us to be educated. My dad, his father died at the age of 13, so had to leave school after that and went to work, selling pots and pans and crockery. We've been gifted really by sacrificial parents who sacrifice everything for our education. 9 out of 10 kids were sent to university education.
Wow, that's amazing.
Out of that small business that my dad ran. And I was fortunate enough to have a scholarship to come to the UK and then did my university here. And then courtesy of the generosity of the British government, I had scholarships to do my PhD in biotechnology and biochemistry, and then did 3 postdoctorate fellowships after that. So that was really my first career.
Yeah.
Thinking I was going to be a scientist, and then I then bailed out because I realized I wasn't smart enough to win a Nobel Prize. So I bailed out and started building my biotech company, and ended up selling it after about 7 years. Cut my teeth there and realized I was a lousy CEO. I didn't enjoy making the same product every day. I'm a bit of a butterfly. I love doing new things. So ended up investing in my capital in a bunch of other biotechs. Was fortunate enough to either sell or list some of them, and ended up running a biotech VC fund, investing in new technologies around drugs, new drugs and new diagnostics. And then on a visit to South Africa some 22 years ago, I took my family on a visit to the largest township outside Cape Town called Khayelitsha, with about 1 million people living in slum conditions there. and became disillusioned, really, Morris, with my own kind of thinking and my own philanthropy. Because, all along I thought, by writing checks to charities, that was how we could transform things amongst the poor. But what I saw there really disillusioned me. And I realized that I could write some more checks, but it wasn't going to make any difference. We're going to change things. And that really was a kind of Damascus Road moment, and that I just felt a calling to move into my third career out of biotech into what I then call social venture capital. We had no terminology at the time, but because I came from a VC background, my thinking was, can you use a kind of venture capital kind of approach, but not in this social sector, without expecting the kind of Silicon Valley type returns. And that really came from my own observation of and experience in Southeast Asia. Africa has received the equivalent of 6 Marshall Plans over a 50-year period, and not much has changed. Whereas Southeast Asia, the Asia Tiger economies, just had foreign investors coming in and building small, medium-sized enterprises, creating jobs for our people, upskilling us, and then stimulating a generation of local entrepreneurs to go and build businesses, either to be their suppliers and then eventually, ultimately, becoming their competitors. And I thought, Africa's not going to be any different. And no country historically has ever been transformed through aid and charity. It's always been transformed through enterprise, through investments and job creation and so on. So that was the beginning of a journey to sort of use my resources, my experience, my gifts and talents now to intentionally build businesses amongst the poor that can have long-term transformation.
And before I ask you to share that part, Kim, I would like to take one step back, because you went very fast, from your upbringing to your amazing career. But when I listen to you, you're saying two things that has me wondering is, one is, 9 out of the 10 children went to university. And so that's pretty amazing. So which, child number 1, 2, were you the youngest? Where were you?
I was in the middle. I was number 6.
You were in the middle.
Yeah.
And are the other children, have they similar careers?
Not quite. I have sisters who are accountants, interior designers. I have a brother who's a plastic surgeon, consultant plastic surgeon, a brother who is a businessman running a supermarket. We've all ended up doing different careers, but all had the benefit of higher education.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, right? I mean, that out of a big family, out of a poor big family, when I listen to you, all of your brothers and sisters are doing or were doing well. That's pretty amazing.
And Morris, in a sense, that has shaped my thinking quite a bit. That from a small, medium-sized business, with sacrifice, you can transform the economics of a poor family in one generation.
Yeah. And are your parents still alive?
No, sadly,
Okay,
my dad passed away about 6-7 years ago, and mom died almost 2 years ago now.
Okay, sorry to hear that. Yeah. And so the most of your family, are they in the UK or are they in Malaysia, or are they all over the world?
We're all over. We're in Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, and the UK.
Yeah. Thank you. So I was interrupting you because we were now at, it ultimately led to your TBN, right? To the, yeah, tell about, your third career.
Yeah, so what I found really was, when you have money, the easiest thing to do is to write a check and then forget about it. What is really difficult is to give your time. And what I found I was being challenged about was really, how do I give of my time? And I fell in love with South Africa after that visit, and wanted to go back and do something there, build a business there. Long story, how I ended up in the poorest province in South Africa called the Eastern Cape, because I thought, if I'm going to keep flying in from London, I must now go and do the really tough stuff, right? And long story, in the end, I ended up deciding to build a safari game park. In the middle of nowhere. We bought 40,000 acres of degraded farmland that nobody wanted. And then fence about 75 kilometers of elephant-proof fencing. Brought big animals back into that part of South Africa for the first time in 150 years. There have been no big animals there for that length of time. And then built a 5-star lodge and intended to use an ecotourism approach to fund conservation, but also to catalyze transformation in a community. So intentionally creating jobs for the people in the community. How do we uplift livelihood? How do we help them to move from having, 1 meal a day to 3 meals a day? How do we move to getting them to have a living wage so that they can start to save and send their kids to school and send their kids to tertiary education? So those are some of the metrics that we have measured over time. But I realized, Mars, when I was doing this, that on my own, I couldn't change hearts and minds. But what was needed was a movement to persuade the Western mindset to think more about investing in Africa rather than doing aid and charity. We've got this certain bias towards Africa in terms of aid and charity. Whereas if we think about Southeast Asia, or we think about China, or maybe even India, we're now thinking investments, right? But we're not thinking investments when we think of Africa. So what was needed was a movement, and that's how we started this network called the Transformational Business Network, TBN. And today we describe it really as a network of several thousand disillusioned philanthropists and repentant bankers. And what we say to business people is, I don't just need your money, I need your time. I need you to come with me on a trip out on what we call holidays in the slums. And go walk the slums, and then see if we can find some businesses, some business entrepreneurs, and put a more robust business plan, put patient capital, put mentoring, put management training in, and help these businesses to grow to scale. So our sweet spot really is to find a business employing 3-5 people and getting them to 50, 100 employees, because I think it's at that stage that they then become sustainable. If businesses, from my VC experience, if businesses are too small or they're undercapitalized, they're forever just going from hand to mouth, spending more time fundraising than running their business and growing their business. So we take a more I would say a disciplined approach, a more VC type approach, and make sure that we give them enough fuel for them to get to profitability. And that's what the TBN network's about. We are in several different countries in Asia and Africa. And what we do is we screen business plans. I think about 200 or so a year, about 100 every 6 months, and then we select maybe 30 or so businesses that we mentor for 6 months to get them to be investment ready. We get their legals, their accounting, their character, which is the first piece that we build in, and then get their strategy and business plans ready to then pitch to investors, and we then bring our network of funds and high net worth families to come and listen to the pitch, and then provide patient capital that way. So today, in addition to doing that, we've been challenging people who have been running VC funds and PE funds to leave their day jobs and come and run these kinds of social impact funds with us. And today, within the network, there are probably about 9-10 of these funds, and we can do anything from $10,000 per deal on a private basis to $250,000 for a club investment, right up to funds that can do $500,000 to $2 million, and funds that can now do $15 million per deal. So we need that to build that ecosystem so that these entrepreneurs are not going to run out of cash and crash and burn. So that's a little about TBN. We run conferences yearly to sort of bring more people together, bring more investors into the space, and help to connect these entrepreneurs together with investors.
Okay, and we'll make sure that the website of TBN is also mentioned in the podcast notes. But just a question to you. So what I understood is, so there is a global TBN network, and then you have Asia, you have North America.
Yeah,
as well.
we have Asia, we have East Africa, Uganda, Kenya particularly, and now in the US, and we are hoping this year to start something in South America as well, Central America, from with the US guys.
So if there is an organization or a person, an entrepreneur, with an idea, how should that person or the group of people, what are the steps that they should take to reach out to TBN to see if there is a fit?
Well, first of all, they've got to be in the country where we are active, and then because this is very much passion led. You don't have a passion and you're not on the ground, it is very difficult. So it has to be in countries that we are operating in. We're just about to start a new fund and a TBN in the Philippines, because they've been coming to the conferences in Southeast Asia with us. So it has to be in the country. And then if there if we're there already, then just contact TBN locally, and they will either get invited to come along to take part in the program, or if they are sizable enough, they can then be introduced to the global network of investors.
Great. Okay. I have a couple of questions about you. So, I know that you're very active around TBN. You're, started with your vision. What makes you, in the morning that you get out of bed? What drives you?
Several things, really. I mean, the motivations are, I would say, twofold. One is clearly my background. When you grow up poor, and you've then been blessed with resources, you can either completely forget about your background, or you think that you've been so blessed that you can bless others. So that is a big part of my motivation. The other part is really my own Christian faith, my own understanding. I came to faith just before university. And a lot of it was really this attractiveness of how the early church lived and practiced their faith. In Acts 1 to Acts 3 and Acts 4, that community was just fantastic. Out of love for one another, they shared everything they had, and no one, claimed anything as belonging to them only. They were able to sell, access land, and share it with one another. And these were typical strangers in Pentecost, on the day of Pentecost. When I saw that, I thought, wow, that's something. If that's what Christianity is about, then sign me up. So that led me to really understand that so much of God's heart is for the poor. And again, we read that in particularly the cry of the prophets. And then I had a journey from in the Torah, and I came to a fresh understanding of what the Jubilee meant. The Jubilee was an amazing economic program where every 3 years you had to bring 10% of what you had to the town hall and share it with strangers and widows and orphans. And then every 7th year, a debt cancellation and a release of slaves and a year's holiday from work for the animals, for his servants, for his slaves, and for the land. Even the land got to rest. So it was a clear instruction not to exploit and rape the land, that we had to be good stewards. And then every 50 years to sort of find that we have to return properties, and a kind of reset button that God intended for Israel to reset so that everybody returned to the original plot of land that God had given them. And a discovery that in one generation, they went from being slaves in Egypt, owning nothing but owned by somebody, to become landowners in the land of prophecy in one generation. And that was the piece of land. Every family had a piece of land. That was their asset. And every 50th year, God resets the button and pressed the reset button, and everybody went back to their original land, and they all started afresh. Mm-hmm. So there was a real sense of justice and social justice, and the vision and the picture that God has given us is that of shalom, of peace, of wholesomeness, of people gathering together and sitting under their vineyard, vine and fig trees and having meals and sharing fellowship. That's shalom. So it's always been God's intention, and God's heart's really for the poor.
I would like to piggyback on a couple of things you just mentioned, because I've talked to many different folks about their drive and how to make this world more sustainable. If you look at the world that we have created for ourselves, how do you look at it now? And you have to see maybe my question in the light of, I have some guests who were saying, well, we have developed a system that's only extracting. It's not, humanity is not in the right balance with nature anymore. So how do you see the world that we have created?
I think the Jewish teachers have it right. They have a phrase called tikkun olam, which means to repair, to fix the world that is in a state of disrepair. So it's a broken world. It's not just nature that's broken. Human society is broken. Human individuals are broken. And we are called to go and bring restoration, both at the individual level, at societal level, community level, at nation level, and, at planet level. This brokenness is everywhere, and that's what we're called to do.
Okay. Kim, this podcast is a spin-off of a 100-mile walk that I started in 2012 to raise awareness and funds, to end hunger, poverty, and injustice. And I just finished my 11th walk 2 weeks ago or so. I came back injured, as my listeners know, but I'm recovering. It's going better. If you would be asked to walk 100 miles in 5 to 7 days, so 15 to 20 miles a day, for which cause would you do it?
Yeah, I would stick with the TBN cause, because I can give money to charity and so on, but it's a plaster. We need to fix the underlying problem, and so there will always be a need for charity. There will always be a need for aid. If you have a humanitarian crisis, that's what you need. But I think for long-term transformation of communities, Morris, I don't see any other way of doing it. We've got to go in, make the investment, create real jobs for people, because part of my own theology is that God created man for work. Where there's unemployment, where there is a lack of work, is dehumanizing. And somehow when you create jobs, you restore something in God's image in people. So yeah, my walk would be to sort of find more of these local entrepreneurs, and back and support them.
Oh, great. During those walks, I'm often accompanied by, what I call co-walkers. They walk with me for a mile or 5 or 10, sometimes the whole day. And, what happens to me is I start thinking about life and then discussing with the co-walkers about spirituality and religion. And very often then we make the link about, okay, what is happening with the younger generation and how is that different from the older? So my question to you is about that, is what do you see happening among youth and spirituality and religion in your community?
I think there is a growing disillusionment with religion. Religion is for many of the young people just irrelevant, they if you ask them to read the Old Testament, it'll be a totally strange book, and religion is just irrelevant, and I don't think it's just the Christian faith. I think many other faiths, especially faiths where there is a freedom to be an atheist or agnostic. Certain faiths where you're not allowed to be an atheist or agnostic. But I think for the young people, certainly both here and in Asia, I think they're finding religion is irrelevant, and it's too sort of too much of the establishment in religion. But at the same time, what we are finding is a growing interest in spirituality. So even though they are not religious, because religion is, and this is where I try and say to people, there is a difference between being religious and being a Christian. Religion is saying you be good, and then God will be your friend, right? God can only be a friend if you're good. Christianity is a religion of grace, and it's saying God loves you as you are now, and then He will help you to be good. So you don't have to be good first. to have this faith. And therein lies the difference between a religion and my own understanding of being a follower of Jesus. But the young people, I think, are very interested in spirituality. They in their hearts, there is a cry for something that is beyond themselves. But if that's not filled properly, they fill it with other things. They can fill it with drugs. They can fill it with materialism. So you had groups that are pursuing drugs. Yes, groups that are pursuing materialism to fill that blank, that emptiness. And so I think, I think Pascal, who said there is a God-shaped blank in our hearts, and if we don't fill it with God, then we'll fill it with other stuff. So the onus is back on us, Morris. How do we practice our faith in such a way that it'll be attractive, so it's not seen as religious, but seen to be a vibrant, exciting faith as followers of Jesus?
So if I listen to you carefully, does TBN does work with the younger generation as well, and does work with non-Christians as well?
Yes.
Okay.
We call ourselves, we describe ourselves as faith-based, but not faith-biased. We will work with people of all faiths and no faiths, because it gives us an opportunity to rub shoulders.
Okay. What are some of the things that you worry about at the moment, Kim?
I think for me, the two big issues are, environmental degradation, and the second one is growing inequalities. The two are kind of related as well. With environmental degradation, we are seeing huge areas that have now experienced drought that they never experienced before, and with that, it's causing people to migrate, and migrations creates all kinds of social problems and creates more poverty and so on. So, the two are related together. The pandemic has shown us that we may be in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Some were in liners and they were fine. Some of us, I was in a liner, I was fine. But some were in these, these rickety boats that, that sank. And the pandemic has shown us very clearly that poverty is the cause can be the cause for environmental degradation as well. So we saw a lot of deforestation of forests during the pandemic because people have to chop trees to sell charcoal to put food on the table. They have to go into your forest to shoot game to put meat on the table. So bushmeat hunting was rife, but you can't blame them. I say to my friends, my Western friends, we should not judge unless we can provide alternatives. It's very easy just, for environmentalists to shout and say, this is bad and so on. But, what are the alternatives? If we were parents, would we go and chop trees so they can put food on the table? I think so. I would. So for me, those are the two big issues. Ours and how do we better steward the environment, planet, as God has charged us, and then two, how do we tackle some of these, enduring poverty issues?
Where do you still see hope?
I'm always hopeful. I'm an optimist. I think my hope comes from my faith. That's where my hope comes from, ultimately. I also have hope because I've seen the transformation of countries, that have sort of started on this journey of industrialization and enterprise, the tiger economies. Yeah, clear example. So I have hope. I believe the data is very, very clear. It's whether we have the resources. I think we have the talent. It's whether we have the political will to want to do it.
I have a question to you about that, because again, with some of the guests, we looked at, what is then the indicator of success? And, some of the things that I've heard is very often, we look at countries and we see them as successful because their GDP is going up. A recent book by Gallup called Blind Spot saying, well, actually that is a mistake. We need to look at happiness. If we looked at happiness indicator, then we would have predicted, then we would have known that the Arab Spring, was about to happen. As an example, is one of the examples in the book. What is your take on that?
I think it's a mix. Nobody can be happy in a slum, surrounded by poverty, walking in sewage, right? Those are not good environments for human flourishing. So, but having said that, among certain tribes in Africa, you are poor if you don't have friends. So that's a salient lesson for us. They can remain very happy whilst being relatively poor. But if you ask them, you ask the poor, would you like a better life for your children? They all say yes, right? So we've got to have some economic development, to have that sense of happiness. You can't be happy if you're sick all the time. You can't be happy if your child gets cholera and typhoid every time there's a monsoon in the slum. So yeah, I think GDP is not everything is cracked out to be, no question. And I think this is why today we're looking beyond a straight GDP bottom line. We're looking at people, we're looking at planet, as well as profit. And now I think maybe we should be thinking about purpose. Instead of 3 Ps, we should be talking about the 4 Ps, right? A lot of people now working in our corporations want to have purpose. What's the purpose of this corporation? What's the purpose of this company? What's my purpose in it?
It's interesting that you mentioned the purpose, because that's one of my previous guests, Kees Klomp, talked about existential economics. But he was saying that especially, the centennials, what their drive is purpose. So that's different than the millennials, for example. And again, you always have to be careful with generalizing, whole generations. But it's kind of interesting that purpose comes up. I would like us to take to a framework that I personally like and always try to advocate for, and that's the Sustainable Development Goals. It's not perfect, but at least as a world, we had a discussion about it. We said, okay, we need to aim for those 17 goals. My question to you about it is, what do you want the listeners to know about the SDGs, about the global goals?
I think the SDGs have been put together by some, consulting firms, putting these targets together, and they're useful. Look, if always have a goal, because if you don't have a goal, you don't have a target, you're bound to hit it. So it's good to have these targets, but unfortunately, I think some of the kind of thinking is a bit shallow. Let me tell you why. So we're all, on this big rush towards renewable energy, and with the ESG and SDG stuff, it's all about that. But quite honestly, if we peel and look, under the bonnet, renewable energy is actually quite dirty. Lithium mining is ugly. Copper mining is ugly. Cobalt mining is poisoning our rivers in our Congo and causing deformities in our children. So there is no perfect target. Even the social side, you look at these clean energy minerals mines, the way they treat their miners. I mean, it is horrible. What about the G? What about the governance side? And the big corporations, Morris, structure their companies using transfer pricing so that they don't pay taxes in the countries where they're generating their revenues, right? Through transfer pricing. So either locate their business in Ireland or Dubai or Mauritius or where Cayman Islands, so they don't have to pay these taxes. And the amount of tax that's, tax avoidance that's going on in Africa is larger than the amount of aid that we give to the continent. So with all these targets, we need to just be a little circumspect, I think, and not to buy in completely. Even with on the green sort of carbon trading side, Deutsche Bank has just been absolutely fine, for all the greenwashing. And there will be impact washing. There'll be SDG washing. So whilst I appreciate these targets, nevertheless, we would like to think a little more carefully, rather than this kind of simplistic. We comply with SDG, 1 to 17 or whatever. So, so that's a slightly jaundiced view from the field.
Yeah, and no, let me again piggyback on what you said. I think a growing group of people, might actually agree with some of the things you said, and that's why they came up with the inner development goals. What they're saying is, without paying proper attention to the skills, abilities, and knowledge that you need as an individual and as a community, you're not going to reach those goals. That's why we are also behind. So they came up with 5 goals as a result of a survey that they did: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and action. And I think what you're alluding to is, have some, to do some work on yourself and as a community in terms of, what is my own role within this? What are my dark sides? What is my shadow side within this whole world? So, what do you think about the inner development goals?
I don't know very much about it, but it ultimately, Morris, it's all about character. Mm-hmm. We will all sign up to the SDG goals, right? I don't know anybody who would say, "Oh, I don't want to sign up to it." We will sign up to the ESG goal, right? Enron had a 60-page code of ethics. I don't think anybody not signed it. Everyone signed it. So what does that say? So it's not about the ethics. It's about the character. It's about the individual. Our own experiences when we take people out on these transformational business holidays in the slum, it's the individuals who come on this journey who get transformed. it's not so much the community. The community get transformed. That's a bonus. But often it's just the individuals who are themselves transformed, and either go back and change career and have a more purposeful career, or restructure their businesses in a way that is more generous and a better steward of the planet, a better employer, and to all their stakeholders. So yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it needs to be the individual and the personal transformation.
One of the things that I hope I'm kind of contributing to with this podcast is to connect people with each other. Connecting you with my listeners, and connecting you also with previous guests. So I have a question of a previous guest for you, which is the following.
My question for the next guest is, what do they believe the biggest cultural influence is right now in the United States? And what do they believe can impact it?
Wow. I don't think, Mars, it's any different to any generation. I think the biggest influence on all our countries is a basic addiction to materialism, and therefore we pursue materialism to the nth degree. If we can't pursue materialism, we have an addiction to drugs and medication, or we have an addiction to sexual abuse. These are all human addictions, and we've had them in every generation, in every country. But maybe in recent times, it's just got worse. Certainly the drug addiction in the United States, for my interest in the pharmaceutical industry, is really bad in a way that I've not seen before. Yeah. So yeah, and the addiction to materialism is this get rich quick kind of way, and stories of people who've just lost fortunes, lost houses through making crazy bets and crazy investments. It's that greed that drives us, right? So, and I've said many times, capitalism is a great system as long as there's no greed. As long as there's no sin, capitalism is a fantastic system. So yeah, I think those will be exactly the same kind of influence that we have in most of the country, and we're seeing that in Asia now, Mars.
Well, what can we do to reverse that?
I think getting our lives sorted out with our Creator, and knowing that when we die, we can take nothing with us, right? So why are we so addicted to all these things? Yeah, I think we really do need to reconnect and relate with our Creator, because when we stand before Him, we are going to have to give an account of ourselves. So I think that's there's just this need. I think it was Mother Teresa when she came to the UK one time. She said, that there is a sort of epidemic of poverty in India where she worked, but in the UK there's a poverty of loneliness. epidemic of loneliness. And I think our loneliness stems from being disconnected from our Creator. And when we reconnect with Him and let, our Creator fill our hearts and our lives, then I think we can tackle some of these issues.
Your question for the next guest.
My question for your next guest. What is the one thing that he or she can do that would transform a community in any country that he or she chooses?
Music is very important to me, so I always have a question about music as well. If I ask you to mention a piece of music or a song that embodies for a big part what you are about, which piece of music or song would that be and why?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one because
it's considered to be my most difficult question by all my guests.
I love different types of music and so on. I in the last week or so been listening to some of Burt Bacharach's songs because he passed away and he was an amazing songwriter. So some of his stuff, just been refreshing myself. But I guess if I had to choose one, probably is the Josh Groban one. You lift me up so I can stand on mountains. You lift me up to walk on troubled seas, and you lift me up so that I can be more than I can be. Be more than I can be. I'm strong when I'm on your shoulders. Yeah, I probably, and that relates to your walk as well. At times when you don't want to walk, maybe you should go on somebody's shoulders. Mars.
Yeah, and is that because you want to be, we're looking for somebody that will carry you, or are you carrying?
I think it's both. I mean, there are times when I need to be carried. And then there are times when I have to carry others.
Great. And just to remind the listeners, all the songs that are selected, picked by my guests are, you can find in Spotify, and when you search for #WalkTalkListen, all those songs that have been selected by my guests are all together there. So it's a lot of fun to listen to.
Right.
Steve Hartman of CBS in the US examines at the moment how one simple act of kindness creates a rippling effect, and if it can. I have two questions for you about this. One is, what do you think about the concept of one simple act of kindness and its potential to create a rippling effect? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, if I ask you to do one simple act of kindness this week, what would you do?
I think that one single act of kindness thing is real. My dad was finally able to build his business because, a rubber estate manager from England gave him his first contract to transport latex from the rubber estate to the port. And in my personal case, I was given a scholarship to a school, which was a fee-paying school, a private school in the UK, a 500-year-old school founded by the Archbishop of Canterbury, called Whitgift. And it was the act of kindness of the headmaster to say, you can come here on scholarship. That not only transformed my academic life, that was also where I met up with other Christians who showed me, what the Christian faith was about, who introduced me to C.S. Lewis and Francis Schaeffer and A.W. Tozer. So I think I do believe in these acts of kindness, Morris. Yeah, I do, and we do it all the time in opening our homes up to strangers, to friends, to missionaries, and then doing large-scale hospitality, largely to international students at our local university. And we've been doing that for 40 years. Because I was once a stranger. I was once a foreigner. I was a foreign student. I appreciated the kind hospitality of the English people. So yeah, I would say I do believe in these simple acts of kindness.
And what would you do this week if I ask you to come up with one for this week?
I think this week is already done. I think we've got a young girl here who's just had a very difficult flight back from Nairobi. She'd been picked up, she'd been fed, and now I'm going to take an hour and a half drive and send her to school.
Great. Any last message, invitation, or question for the listeners?
Yeah, I think, for those listeners who are professionals, who are in business, think about how to use your gifts and your talents and your resources intentionally to help a local entrepreneur build and scale his or her business. Because if 10 of us targeted a slum somewhere, and we went in and built 10 businesses, with 10 local entrepreneurs, and each one of these businesses end up employing 50 to 100 people. Hey, you know what? In 4 or 5 years, we'll see change.
Yeah, these times are always go fast, Kim. And, any question that I should have asked you, which I didn't?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a bit. Yeah, it's always fun, to sort of think about some of these issues.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for who you are, for what you do. It was really a pleasure. I enjoyed it, and I'm sure the listeners as well. So thank you so much.
No, absolute pleasure, Morris. Keep up the good work. Keep walking. Did you listen to that song, 100 Miles?
Yes. Yeah, you told me last time. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned your 100 miles, I thought, hey, there's this song there. You should listen to it. I can't remember who sang it, but it was one of these old pop groups.
Yeah, no, I don't remember also who did it, but then when you told me last time we spoke, I searched for it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Very good.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.